to share what I've learned over my whole lifetime. I've been growing plants for 62 years. I started when I was 8 years old, so that's how old I am. And I just enjoy it so much. I've learned so much from people like Ron and so many of the others. I mean, even these two guys here. I learn from them every time I go to Green Thumb. Jonathan's always teaching me something, and we're always sharing back and forth, because that's what it's all about.
Okay, we're live.
Okay.
Do you want to use the mic, or?
Sure.
I think it'll be a little easier to project. Sometimes there's some background noise.
Is that working good? Okay. So, thank you for coming. My name is Michael Wittman. My company is Blue Sky Biochar. How many of you know or heard of Biochar? Okay. I started working with Biochar 17 years ago. And no one knew what I was talking about. In fact, I almost didn't know what I was talking about. I got into it, I started studying it, started using it, started making it, and then eventually started selling it. But every mistake you can make with Biochar, I made. And I don't anymore. And all the people that I work with that come to my workshops and classes, or my clients that I do consulting work as my work as a soil consultant, have all learned from my mistakes. So what I'm trying to do here is, in this work, is to help you to not make the mistakes, waste your money, waste your time, and probably more important than anything, the aggravation factor of making a mistake sometimes discourages you and you just chuck it. Say, I'm done, you know. That's not the way I work. I'll make a mistake and I'll go, I'm going to learn now. And I'll find out what I did. So I want to try to help you to learn from those mistakes so you can move forward further than I did when I started doing this. So biochar is charcoal suitable for soil. It's not a fertilizer, it's not a food, it's strictly a physical thing. That this is a piece of biochar here. And what it is, the piece of wood that this was made from was fully carbonized, or fully made into charcoal. There's no organic left in this piece of wood that was originally in it. It's just the skeleton of the carbon that it was originally made from. So it's very lightweight, and it's very porous. So biochar, nature has been making biochar for 500 million years, since the first plants grew on land and were burnt by lightning or other fire effects, would be volcanic. And though the charcoal left behind is what rejuvenates the soil. But fire is essential to the ecosystem. And it's one of the subjects that I've been studying for many years, and I find it so fascinating to understand it. So I'm going to give you a little simple overview of what fire is and what it does. First thing, we would not be here if there was no fire on this planet. None of these trees and plants would be here without fire on this planet, starting way, way back. Now, humans did discover biochar about 8,000 years ago, and we know that from carbon dating. And but we don't know much about the culture. What we do know is that the Amazonian region of Brazil, the indigenous peoples, about 3,000 years ago, discovered it accidentally and started using it in the rainforest. Now, those of you that don't know this, the rainforest is amongst the worst soil on the planet because it has no nutrients, because the rain is so intense, it washes all the nutrients and all the biology away. So when they started adding this about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago into the soils, it changed the whole profile of the soil. When you go to the rainforest today in this region and you dig down 2 meters, you see this beautiful black, rich, full of biology and full of organic matter. And you step outside that area and dig down 2 meters and look, and you'll see just barren soil. Nothing there, hardly at all. The only fertility in the rainforest is the top 6 to 8 inches, where all the leaves and all the organic matter is decomposing in a compost-type method. That's the only fertility that's there. The rest is dead, except the region which we call Terra Preta de Indio. The dark soil of the indigenous. It's a Portuguese term. Now, I'm not going to get into the history, even though I studied it intricately, about how they did it all, because we don't have time for that. We only have a half hour, so we're going to go move along. So, what are the features of biochar? What are the special things that make biochar so unique? Again, it's not a food, it's not a fertilizer. It has no value that way. There's no NPK to it. It's strictly this little skeleton. It manages water, nutrients, and microbiology to the highest degree nature can provide. So first off, we use it in a granular form. Okay? And in a granular form, we get the most surface area out of it. If we were to use this big chunk here, the middle of it wouldn't get affected because it only works on the surface. So you need a small piece, or 1 to 10 millimeter, to have the highest surface area. So when these little granules are mixed into our soil, each one will hold 7 times its weight in water. That means around the root zone, there's these little mini reservoirs all over the place that the roots attach to, and now they have this incredible water supply beyond what soil can normally provide them. So what does it do? It drought tolerates. It's really amazing how well it works. Secondly, the nutrients in the soil, the fertilizers, whatever, organic, non-organic, whatever you're using, when it rains or you irrigate, what happens? The nutrients run off downstream. Biochar, when properly used and proper protocol in your soil, will reduce that runoff of nutrients by up to 80%. And we did testing years ago up in Oregon State University. We took a whole series of potted plants. And a series of them had no biochar, and then it moved along a little more until the very end where it had a lot of biochar in it. And we watered the exact same watering through each pot and collected the water that came out the bottom. And all of it is turbid until you get to the high biochar where the water is clear. Because the nutrients stayed in the root zone. So nutrient retention very high. But ultimately what I love the most about biochar, one of the great features, is this. Can you see that? That is a scanning electron microscope of a piece of biochar, and you can see the porous nature of it, the nooks and crannies that it has. Each one of those is a luxury condominium for microbiology. They move into this structure, expand their colonies. You build your microbiology, and I guess I don't have to explain to you how well your soil is going to react. It's the microbiology that does everything in our soil. And I'm sure you've all heard that in 1 teaspoon of soil, there's billions and billions of microbial life in there, and it's very true. And they move into this structure, and they are happy as can be. So we've got water nutrient retention, water, nutrient, and microbiology retention. Biochar is carbon negative 3 to 1. What does that mean? Well, simply put, for every pound of biochar that we put into the ground, we have prevented 3 pounds of carbon gases from going into the atmosphere. It doesn't suck it out of the atmosphere. The material that we make this from sits around and off gases, sending gases off. When we pyrolyze it through the process of indirect heat without oxygen, we lock it right in there, and when we bury it, we bury it. So we're sequestering carbon. When we build our microbiology in our soil, the soil becomes a carbon sink just that way as well. So when you create a living soil, as I call it, a regenerative soil, unlike even the best bagged soils, which will deplete in a season or two, you build your regenerative soils. There's no way to buy them right now. Nobody that I know of, no company, regardless of what they say on my label, produces a soil that has got everything in it that I would call a living regenerative soil. We're going to talk about what those ingredients are in a second. So, by having it hold all these things and manage the microbiology, and by being carbon negative, the other thing about the biochar is it's a fixed carbon. This has a life of over 2,000 years. We know this for an absolute fact because the ancient Amazonians did it 2,500, 3,000 years ago, and that chart is still there working today. In fact, people for many, many generations go there to dig it up. I don't know if they allow me to do that anymore, but that was being done. Now they're trying to protect it more because it's such a vital asset to that region. And people are creating this. Now, by the way, when the Amazonians did this, all over the world, other indigenous cultures did the same thing, just not to the same massive level. How did they do it when they had no communication with each other? Anybody know? Huh?
They accidentally also discovered.
Because indigenous peoples of the world, everything they did in their world was right there in front of their face. They didn't live in a society that had all these distractions. They were focused on survival and reproducing their kind. And the only way to do that is to watch the land and watch nature and react to it. When they first discovered biochar, it was accident. They were cooking in communal fire pits, and the charcoal kept building up. They would toss it aside so they could put more wood in there to continue to cook. And they started noticing, wow, what's happening over there? That's really amazing. And they were so in tune with it. So I study indigenous cultures. You got to. They were so smart. It's not that they were so smart, they were so in tune with the environment, with the lake, with nature, with everything around them. So that was why other cultures found it. Charcoal is the oldest human remedy in existence. Before we had any kind of natural remedies of any sort, this is the one that humans used first. Animals have been seeking out charcoal from fires, both natural and man-made fire pits and such, since the beginning of animals roaming on the earth. It's very healthy. There's a whole wing of biochar work in animal husbandry, feeding it to animals, and I wish I had time to explain it all. If you want to come to the booth after this, we'll talk about it a bit, but animals go crazy for this stuff. You feed it to your chickens, you're going to get way better, healthier eggs with higher omega, vitamins, minerals, protein. The chickens will be healthier. In Europe, they feed it to cattle, and they found that the meat cattle produce more and better meat, the dairy cattle produce more and better milk. They fed it 2% of the food, cut the methane emissions better than kelp or any other thing that we've been talking about in society today to cut the methane from cattle. By the way, where does the methane come out of cattle? Here, not here. Because they're ruminants, they have 4 stomachs, so all the action of the methane is happening in the first half of their body, and they're belching it out, not farting it out. So that's an interesting thing. So all animals can benefit. My 3 dogs, which are no longer with us, I fed them once a week. I fed them charcoal in their food. They were very healthy. Their poo came out black, didn't smell, dried up so fast the flies abandoned it. So it was pretty cool that way. So getting back to the biochar and how we use it in this living soil, I would encourage everybody to take my business card, unless you've already come by the booth and grab one. And when you get a chance, go to my website, blueskybiochar.com, and I'll give you my card so you don't have to write it down. Go to the video and podcast page and watch the first 3 videos. They're very well produced. They're great videos. One is on biochar, the second one is on living soil, and the third one is on bamboo wood vinegar. You may not know what it is, but you want to, and you will be using it. It's very important. It's not like other vinegars. This is liquid smoke. It's pyroligenic acid. White vinegar, apple cider vinegar, those are fermented vinegars, so they're quite a bit different. This has organic compounds, this wood vinegar, that regular vinegars don't have. So it's both a protectant from disease and pests, and a biostimulant for the plants. We use it in both foliar and mid soils. It's amazing what it will do. And it's very effective. I'll pass this around. Just give it a little smell. It's really good. You ever cook with wood smoke? Okay, some barbecue chefs, the best ones in the world, use something very similar to this. Except this is more geared to what we're doing. So the wood vinegar is a very important part. Now, what is a living soil? How do we make it? What do we put into our living soil? Well, obviously we have our base soil, whether it's an existing soil or a soil we're going to buy. Then we're going to be adding our own ingredients to create this living soil, or this regenerative soil. And one of them, of course, is the biochar. Next is compost. Worm castings. Why both? Because they're different. They do different things. And worm castings are very important. I can't tell you how important they are. And Organic Solution, which has a booth over here next to me, is my buddy. I'm his rep and his dealer, and I'm his distributor. But his worm castings are not like others because they're so rich in biology. A lot of worm castings, I'm not going to get into brand, but a lot of the worm castings that are the major ones, they dry them out, so the biology's dried out. His are never dried out. They have both bacterial and fungal, and he's got eggs and babies in there, so when you use those castings, they propagate in your soils. So you can spread the word with the worms. After the worm castings, we're going to be putting in rock dust. Anybody not know what rock dust is? Okay, it's minerals. It could be granite, it could be basalt, it could be many things. Do you notice outside there was a company called Azomite in the room there? Okay, Azomite is a very good mineral. It's a basic mineral. It has 78 minerals and trace minerals from A to Z. That's why they call it Azomite. And it's a good product. But several years back, a friend of mine who's a researcher came to me and he said, you know, we've been using azomite, we've been using granite, we've been using basalt or leonardite or these other minerals. He goes, a group of us got together, we started blending 7 of them together. I said, really? That sounds great. Broader spectrum, more complex. Many more than just the 78 that azomite has. So I started blending it with 7. And then the next batch we made with 9 different minerals. And then we went to 11, then we went to 13. Now the last batch we only have 12. Because one of them became very difficult to get, and so we just left it out. But still, it's so broad spectrum. Now, when I do a landscape job, I'm going to use just either azomite or one of the singles because they're less expensive for these giant areas. When we're growing food or vegetables, fruits or vegetables, we're going to use our super complex blend, which is broad spectrum, and it makes a big difference because all cellular structure life on Earth needs minerals to build that cellular structure. The microbiology and the root systems in the ground need those minerals to develop. So when you give them the minerals, and I'm sure many of us don't do minerals, but when you do, there's a difference. Now, there's a difference with the BAT, there's a difference with the biochar. Why are you having all these things? Because we want the biggest possible difference to get that regenerative soil that it keeps getting better every year. So we use our complex mineral dust, mineral rock dust. After that, we're going to put into our soil mycorrhizae. Anybody know what mycorrhizae are? Yes. Tell us.
It grows on the roots of the plants. It's the little nodules that grow on the roots of the plants.
Yeah, it develops that, it stimulates that. Okay, so when we're talking about microbiology in our soil, let's just keep it simple. We've got our bacterial and we've got our fungal. Okay, just to keep it so simple. There are many species of bacterial, let's not get into that, but there's only good and bad bacterial. How do you know when it's bad? It stinks like holy hell. When it's good, it smells good, like good compost, good earth, good soil. So that's simple. When bacterial goes bad, it goes anaerobic, meaning there's no air down there and it just starts to putrefy. And I've run across it occasionally, and we have ways of fixing it, but we don't have time to get into that now. So let's talk about the fungal, because that's the issue, that's the part that we're more concerned about, because the bacterial is pretty hardy stuff. I mean, it literally could survive an ice age. But fungal cannot survive being pulled out of the ground, exposed to air and light, and starts to die right away. So we add mycorrhizae to those soils, and we do it in 2 possible ways. One is a granular that we can mix into the soil, and the other is a very fine powder that's water soluble that we can mix in with other nutrients in biology and drench around the plants after we've created our living soil. So when you are bacterial dominant in your soil, you tend to be more alkaline in your soil. When you tend to be more fungal dominant, you tend to be more slightly acidic, and we really all want to be more acidic. One reason is because our waters are 8.1 and higher. Now, granted, Distilled plain water is 7, but we don't have that because we put chemicals in the water to be able to ship it around and drink it without dying from diseases and bacteria and viruses and such. So we really need to build that fungal and protect that fungal and do everything we can to give that fungal a head start. So we put mycorrhizae in the ground. After we get the soil, the biochar, the compost, the worm castings, the rock dust, and the mycorrhizae in the soil, blended in, what's the next thing? How do we protect that soil? Mulch. Very good. You can over-mulch pretty well. I mean, you don't want to go this thick. But mulch does several things that sometimes we don't always realize. And one of them is obvious. It protects the moisture in the soil. It's pretty obvious, and it's good. But it's also a sunscreen. Because the sun can, if you have open soil, and that sun is bearing down on it, the UV rays are so high in the last 5 years. Right now, they're down to 5. But earlier today, it was 10 in the middle of the day at around noon. And that's extreme. So the meteorologists don't talk about, we know we got more hot days and longer hot days, and the climate change is really affecting everything, but the UV is also affecting it. So the mulch is a sunscreen. As the mulch decomposes, and I prefer wood chip mulch, but pretty much anything works. I just like the wood chip. It feeds the mycorrhizae fungal on the top of the soil and on the bottom of the mulch. And sometimes you can actually see those little white stringy things if you pull the mulch away. It's been sitting there for a while. And somebody goes, oh no, what's that? That's good stuff. You want that stuff. It's the mycorrhizae fungal. And the other interesting thing about mulch, particularly wood chip mulch, is when water goes through mulch, it creates humic acid. And we want humic acid because it helps with cation exchanges and other things that it does. Now, most of the humic acid that we find on the shelves is coming from leonardite, which is a mineral mined in Canada. We get humics and fulvics from the leonardite. And it's usually sold as a humic product in granular form. You know, we use a lot of it in the work that we do. So we're getting it naturally by water going through that mulch. Now, obviously, if you have below the mulch drip lines, it's not going to happen. I'm not the biggest fan of most of the drip systems. They're a good idea. They are good. They save water, less evaporation, but you're not getting the natural effect of water coming like rain now, going through the mulch, hitting the plants, and doing all of that. So you're kind of missing it a little bit when you do that. So you got to understand that if you do it because you want to save water, and they do save water, you're going to miss out on some of the aspects that nature has by having rain fall down on top. And how many of you are collecting rainwater? Cool. Yeah, I used to have about 1,900 gallons worth, but I have less now because we put a couple of Tesla batteries on the side of the house for the solar, and we told us we couldn't put our tanks there anymore, so we had to donate them to somebody else. But that's the living soil. So in the workshops that I do, we have 3 stages to the process. First is creating living soil, protecting the mulch. Secondly is maintaining it over the years with compost, worm castings, and liquid drenches of various ingredients. We don't have time to get into that now. There's only a few minutes left. And we maintain it, and then foliar application. How many here are doing foliar spraying, particularly with compost tea? Anybody done compost teas? Okay. Compost tea is a wonderful thing. And I'm never going to discourage anybody from doing it. But I will tell you that there are 3 things in compost tea that you need to do to get it to the peak that you want it to be. Doesn't mean that if you do it and it's a little wrong that it won't work. It just won't work as well as it could work. And those 3 things are, when you brew your tea, you got to brew it to the exact point that it's at its peak before it goes over the edge, because otherwise it starts to deteriorate. Secondly, in most common classes, they say use your compost tea within 6 to 8 hours. For me, it's 2 to 3 hours. The longer you let it sit around, the more it degrades. And the third thing is the way you spray it. If you put it in a system that has one of those impellers that acts like a blender and heats up the liquid, it's going to kill a lot of it. So you want to use one of those pump things where it's just air pressing out, and then spray it out, and do it in the evening. So foliar, why do I say this? Why don't you bring it up if many of you aren't doing it? Well, you don't have to do compost tea to do foliar. And why is foliar important? Is because the leaves are the factory of the plant. Down below ground is just a supply chain of water and nutrients going up to the leaves. Photosynthesis converting those into sugars and carbs, going back down two-way street, back down to feed those sugars and carbs to the microbiology and to the root systems. So it's a two-way street. If you do all these right, it opens up to a two-way highway. And when that happens, whoa, look out, because the Brix level rises. Who knows what Brix level is? Yes? Sugar content, B-R-I-X, the sugar content. Very few people are really paying attention. I've been doing it for a long time, 13 years at least. I've had this thing for 13 years. This is a refractometer. It's a special tool that we use to measure the Brix. You simply take a little liquid from the fruit, if it's a fruit or a vegetable, or the leaf. I like to measure both because it's the plant that I'm interested in more so than the fruit. Sometimes the fruit can ripen and get a little sweeter than the plant really got. So I want to make sure I can check both. And you take a couple of drops and you put it on there, put that down, you look through it in the light. There's a blue background with numbers on the side, and the white moves up, and wherever that white blue line is, that's your Brix level. And if you get your Brix level up to 12 or more, the plants become pretty much immune from disease and pests. So here is a basic Brix chart. You go from 1, goes up to 20, and you can see right at 12, when it gets no insects, no diseases, no one. Very few insects and diseases will mess with a plant that has very high Brix level. This is its own special immunity. Its own way, like you and I take some omegas and all the good things we take, to make our immunity stronger. This is how you do it for your plants. So now you can create pretty much disease and pest-free plants. Not 100%. There are some critters that are going to still bite on them, but not as many. Far fewer. What is the other third thing that you get from a high Brix level? Anybody know? Come on, somebody else. Taste, yes, that's true. It's not what I was going for, but that's right. My grapefruits are sweeter than anybody else's. My lemons are slightly sweet. They're still tart, but they're sweeter. All my fruits are sweeter. All my vegetables, but it's not it. It's the nutrient density that rises really high. Nutrient density is something very few people are talking about. And yet we know for the last 40 years, even in the best organic farming markets and farmers markets and farms and stores, nutrient density has been taking a slide down for 40 years. Why? Because they're focusing on not using chemicals to grow the plants or maintain the plants, but they're not building the living soils that create that higher Brix level that give us the plants the immunity and us higher nutritional value. So the Brix testing is like a blood test. It's not the only thing you can do, but it's the simplest, easiest, most absolutely quickest way to check how your plants and trees and so forth are doing. Now, who else uses a refractometer? Yes?
I got a handle.
No, I don't meant you as a person. What I meant was, what other industries? Winemakers, beer makers, honey, people who collect honey. The best chefs in the world will have one of these in their pocket. When the food comes in from the market, they will this one's there, it'll adjust itself properly for the variations in temperature. But this is one of my most valuable tools, is this. And everybody goes, I never saw one of those before. I didn't even imagine it. But I would hope to see that everybody has one eventually. We have a little kit that we sell that has a good one in it, along with a couple of other tools. I don't have time to get into this because we're really running low on this, and I think the next person is going to come in. But there's other little nuances and things that I do in collecting the juice. Like the leaves of certain plants, there's so little juice in there, how do you get it out of there? And you have 2 drops of it to put on you. Well, I got these other little things that I use and put into the kit. to be able to do that. One's a press and one's a special scissor that has 5 blades and shreds the leaves up so the juice comes out easier. Any questions at this point, please? Yes.
A while ago, I heard that there was an app that might be coming out so that customers could go into a grocery store and then test the fruits or vegetables and see what the Brix levels are. Is that,
I never heard of any market doing that.
Bionutrient Association. They're looking at a meter. We've got a little.
Oh, the digital ones.
Yeah, so it bounces like 5 different frequencies of light off of the fruit or vegetable.
Right.
And then it gives you a reading of the low, medium, or high quality. And they're working on calibrating it at this point.
Yeah, no, I know about those things. I didn't realize that the markets were actually doing it. I'd be surprised because, people will come in and they'll get all these tomatoes in there and they're not going to match up to what people were expecting. And so all of a sudden they're going to walk away and not buy the tomatoes and the store's going to go, wait a minute, get that thing out of here. That's just my thought, This does the exact same thing with the light, except it's doing it analogically. Those are doing it digitally. And I have not bought a digital meter. I don't need one. I got this and it works fantastic.
Well, the bionutrient meter bounces light off of the fruit or vegetable. And so it's a non-destructive.
Oh, so you don't even have to juice it, you just okay.
You just bounce
Yeah,
light
Matt
off.
Powers has been telling me about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he bought one of those units and he's been promoting it.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
So when you get your biochar in your compost and your process and how long do you let that sit?
Well, once I build my living soil, I'm ready to go. Now, you brought up an interesting thought there, and that is the biochar. And I didn't mention this earlier. I'm going to take a moment to do it now.
No.
Raw.
Wrap up about 5 minutes.
Okay. Raw biochar is not necessarily what we consider ready to use in the soil. If you use it in the soil raw, it will take a little time for it to fill itself up with all the nutrients and biology, and by that point, it's going to take it away from whatever's growing around it. So if you put raw biochar in the ground and plant, you'll see those plants won't grow as vigorously the first year as they will the second year once it fills up and starts pushing forward. Right now, it's backing up a little by taking it in. So we want to inoculate, charge, add nutrients and biology to our to our biochar. And there's 3 basic ways of doing it. My favorite is to mix it in with your compost during the composting cycle. That's the biggest win-win because the biochar comes out awesome and the compost comes out really awesome because when you're finished with your typical compost cycle, the nitrogen levels are 3 to 5% maybe, and with biochar you can preserve 50 to 75% of that nitrogen. It holds water, so you'll water your pile less. It speeds up the process a little bit, and it holds the biology inside the biochar, so when you turn your compost, you're not destroying all that biology because it's now protected with the biochar. It's in that little structure being protected because many of us have to turn our compost when we're making it, right? I have an aerated system in my home. I got a massive thing. And air comes up every hour, so I don't have to turn my compost. And we use 12 different ingredients. We use biochar, we use rock dust, we use bokashi. Anybody knows what bokashi is? Bokashi is amazing stuff. There's a whole bunch of things that we put in our compost that others don't. And we have a compost that you cannot buy in a store. And 80% of it we use on our property, and the other 20% of it slip through and give to friends and sell a few bags here. Or if I'm doing a special project, I'll use that compost for it. Otherwise, we'll just use others because I can't make enough of it. Yes?
How much biochar do you put in for how much time?
Thank you. So the variations are anywhere from 5 to 50%. And why is that way? Because it depends on how much biochar you've already put in your soil and how much you want to keep adding. Now, we know that biochar is permanently going to be there, but it doesn't mean you want to add more. So it depends on how much you want to keep adding as you add your compost to the soils. So if you want to add a lot, you go 50%. If you want to add a little bit, you go 5. I go 20, 15 to 20. I find that for me, it's my sweet spot. And it's enough to give the compost that push forward in preserving that nitrogen and doing all the wonderful things that it does. Now, by the way, nature has been composting biochar from the beginning. Because when that biochar lays on the ground after a fire, it doesn't go down the ground right away. It sits there. Organic matter falls on top, decomposes, with the biochar. So nature's been doing that since the beginning as well. It's not something we decided to do. It's always been done that way. Yes?
How do you know when the compost tea is at its peak?
Generally, you need to have a microscope.
Okay.
Yeah, most people will use a microscope to do that. And again, not everybody's going to do that. Only a bunch of crazy people like me and Matt Powers and a few of us that really got to do that. And to be honest with you, since I'm not doing teas, I have a microscope, but I don't use it for that. I just don't have the time. I'm so busy. I got a lot going on. So I can do as best as I can. So let's see. What was the other thing? Am I kicked off now, or I got another second?
How do you grow your biochar?
Good question. We sell biochar already grounded into the 1 to 10 millimeter size, both raw and inoculated. My buddy Brian from Organic Solution has a product called Superchar, which is 20% worm castings, 80% biochar, hydrated with a liquid worm casting and a couple other goodies, a little humate in there as well. And that's ready to use. It comes in 1 cubic foot bags. And you can get it from us on our website, or you can come visit. I have a very large garden. I know a few of the people have been here. You haven't seen it lately. It's pretty cool. We finished our hugelkultur. So I'm gonna give some cards out. Anybody who wants to come visit my garden, just call me up. Bring as many people as you want. We'll do a tour every week. Somebody's coming through. Obviously not this week, but most of the time. And it's not the most beautiful garden because it's a work in progress, but the things we have in place, our hugelkultur, our food forest, our raised beds, we have a thing we call the fortress. It's a caged-in garden to keep the critters out of certain things. And then we've got a little citrus area. And then we have an area on a hillside that's all thick brush and trees. And we're going to turn it into a mushroom forest next year. We're going to grow all kinds of mushrooms up there because it's real dark and little mushroomy like habitat. Yes? I'm in Thousand Oaks, California. So I'll stand in the back. I'm going to get out of here because my good buddy's going to be picking up the slack here in a second.
Or we got the annex over here. Yeah. Either way, the back or the annex.
Yes, it is. Oh, sorry, what was that? Ron?
Oh, there's an annex over here. Just some benches over here, or in the back.
So we can go outside if anybody, or they want to stay and listen to Stephen. This guy is.
We got options.
Stephen, you're next, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Stephen he's a true compost master.